Hey everyone, thanks for checking out the channel. I've got to apologize. I mistakenly deleted some of the files that I had on the build of this rail cart. They were all right at the very beginning, so you'll actually be able to see how I built it. What it did was describe everything that I put into this cart and where I got it. It's really not surprising that I did that because I end up with about 200 clips for each one of these longer videos like this where I'm building something and all. What I decided to go with was a very budget build on this. I didn't want to throw a lot of money at it. I had the feeling that for just a few dollars we could put together something nice that works well and doesn't take you a year to build either. This is actually a one-day build, and then I took it out and I rode about 40 something miles of track, and it did beautifully. And I'm going to be doing many more rides with this, so please subscribe to the channel if you want to see more Colorado back rails rides. They will be coming up soon. I've actually got one coming up here just in the next day or two. I filmed it yesterday, and it was really the first time that I took this out and tested it, and it did really well. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments and I'll try to answer them. But here is the build video, and I hope it answers your questions. So the heart of this build is actually one of these big black plastic pallets. You can get these just about anywhere. I see them for free all the time on Craigslist. People just trying to get rid of them. I went behind my local grocery store and they were happy to give me one of these. So these are a really super rigid piece here. They weigh a bit, and I will throw this on the scale just to see what it weighs. I'm just curious. But they're super strong, and because they are so strong, I'm not going to have to do a whole lot of reinforcing on them. This style has these built-in metal tracks in them that run kind of all directions, and it takes all the flex out of them, so they're very stable. So it's a great platform to build off of. I also picked up a tub over at Walmart, went to Harbor Freight, and I got 4 of these 10-inch wheels. Now the 10-inch is the outer diameter of the tread on the tire, and they are a bearing wheel, and they have the bolted flanges, which will come in handy later in the build. So 4 of those. These retailed for just under $10 a piece, so I've got $40 into the wheels. The hardware all came off of Amazon. It was just by far the cheapest way to buy it. My local hardware stores have gotten kind of silly on the cost of some of this hardware stuff, so I was able to get all of this for about $28. Coming down here, we've got this 3/4 inch plastic. Now this is something that I don't expect the average person to have, but I will give alternatives to this. This is something left over from some other building that I did a while back. So I'm going to cut the discs out of these that are going to go onto the wheels. They're larger diameter than the wheel themselves, and these will keep the tires on the track. We've got some silicone, miscellaneous pieces of pipe. That's just one of them. May need some for axle spacers, other spacers. You're going to need these kind of mounts for your bike fork. These will mount essentially to the pallet. I may have to raise them just a hair to get the right angle of the bike. But had a couple of these, so they didn't cost me anything. If you need to buy them, you're looking at about $15 a piece on Amazon. I'm going to put some of this flat out into the tires, make sure I never get a flat. I've got some black nylon webbing, piece of hose there, and my axles came from my local steel supplier. Now these wheels come with a 5/8 inch diameter axle, and so I went and got these. They sell this steel 5/8 inch rod in 10-foot sections. It just so happened that I needed 2 5-foot sections, so that's what these are cut at. They cut them for me, and this hardened steel axles cost me $30 from Dencall Supply here in Denver. So if you're close to the Denver area, always a good place to go. So those are my basic pieces and parts to get started here. I'm going to need a router today. If you don't have a router, you can use a jigsaw. Pretty much everybody's got one of those, or you can borrow one. Just some basic hand tools, a couple of router bits, and a screw gun and that kind of thing. So that's what we need to get started. And we'll go ahead, I think I'm going to go ahead and start with the wheels first, just because they're the kind of the fun part of this whole build. And we'll get going on those. The first thing I'm going to do is make a plate for the bottom of the router here so that we can cut out close to perfect circles. The overall diameter of the wheel is 10 inches. So I'm thinking that I want this guide flange to be 1.5 inches out beyond the tread, and that should be plenty to keep it on the track. So 1.5 inches times 2, we got 3 inches of additional diameter. So we're going to go with a 13-inch circle here. But when I was thinking about how much flange I wanted sticking over the tire on the wheels, I was thinking, boy, I sure wish there were some railroad tracks close that I could measure. And then I realized that my grandfather had built this cool little anvil out of a piece of railroad track. And so I'm assuming this is probably from the late 1800s. I'm sure he made this in the early 1900s. I use it regularly, and I completely forgot that it was a railroad track. So I took my measurements off of this. I'm assuming this is going to be very close to the kind of tracks that I'm running on. And yeah, so figured out center lines and how far down that flange could stick without actually starting to hit things and all of that. So, okay, now that I know this fits and the router bit has poked out through here making the center hole, I went ahead and pulled this back off, countersunk these so that they're not sticking out, and then this will slide smoothly on the plastic here. We have the locator hole over here, 6.5 inches from the edge of the router bit hole. So that's going to give us a 13-inch circle. Let's take our plate that we added, and we've got a screw here, and we're going to put that right through where that mark is. Okay, just quick and easy, and now you've got a perfect circle here. We've also got a center hole, which we'll need when we drill out for the hub on the wheel. Flange sticking out about 1.5 inches looks right to me. I think that'll keep it on the track nicely without getting in the way. We're also going to chamfer these outer edges so that if they come in contact with anything, they'll kind of glance off and not jam or nick the wheel itself. So this flange on these wheels is 1.5 inch OD. Our plastic piece is going to be drilled and then actually fit tightly over that 1.5 inch, which will center it. And then a couple of these bolts here will be removed, longer ones put in, and those will hold the disc in place up tight against the wheel here. In the centers of each one of these discs, and we already have our center hole marked there because that's what we used for routering the circle out. So I like to use Forstner bits. They are this type of bit. They make a really clean, precise hole versus something like this, the hole saw bits. If this is all you got, you can use that. That's all right, but it won't be nearly as tight a fit or as precise as if you use one of these Forstners. I'm using the drill press here, but there's not any reason that you couldn't use a hand drill and a hole saw. it would still work. It just wouldn't be quite the same tight tolerances. The next step is I need to figure out exactly where these holes need to be drilled on the disc. And so to do that, I'm going to remove this flange, and then I'll be able to drop it on the disc and mark exactly where they need to be. So I just undo these 4 bolts. Before I do that, I need to let the air out of this tire. This hub will remove, and that's your hardware left over. And then these sides of the rim are separate. That's what they call a split rim. But this is the piece we're looking for. You can set that stuff aside. And what we're going to do is just pick this up, drop that right in there. And from this side, we can just mark where 2 holes will be. And we mark each hole. There we go. And here's one of the wheels all completely assembled. While I had the valve core out, I went ahead and put in the flat out so that I won't get a flat on this. Reinflated it to 15 psi, which seems to be plenty for this. I don't feel really any give at all in that tire at 15 psi. It's rated to up to 30 psi. So I can go much higher if I decide I need to, but I can't imagine I will. So that is how our wheels are going to be bolted together. The plastic that I use here is 3/4 of an inch thick. It's super abrasion resistant, so that's why I was thinking that it was perfect for this application. I think it'll also be fairly quiet as it hits the rails, much more quiet than, say, a steel disc, something like that. To find this stuff, I just did a quick look here on Facebook Marketplace, and this guy's got 36-inch squares of it for sale for $20. So one of those squares would be enough to do all 4 of your wheels, so 20 bucks there. Another alternative is to use these plastic cutting boards. This stuff is generally referred to as Delrin. That's a brand name actually for the plastic. But those type of cutting boards are definitely an option. Very rigid, very abrasion resistant as well. This kind of plastic here is called HDP. That stands for high density polyethylene. So if you're going to buy it from a plastic supplier, you can always look for that. But you could also cut these out of plywood, obviously. They're not going to last nearly as long. And you could do them out of steel as well if you have the ability to actually cut out of steel and have that around. Just know that obviously the steel is going to be much, much noisier on the tracks than this plastic will be. Okay, let's take a look at the pallet, which is going to be the main frame of the vehicle. It measures 48 by 40, so pretty much a standard size pallet. And I've got it hanging from my scale here, and this actually weighs 52 pounds, so it's no lightweight by any means. That's 23 kilograms. So by far the biggest, heaviest piece of this, but at 50 pounds, that's still not horrible. I'll be able to easily get it off the rails and back on and around obstacles and that kind of thing. Shouldn't be much of an issue. The rest of the vehicle really isn't going to weigh much, so we'll weigh it when I'm done, but we're probably looking at about 65 pounds, something like that for the whole thing. So very manageable weight. My 5/8 inch axle will go on the wide side here, so we're running the full 48 inches of width. And I bought these guys on Amazon. They're actually a really nice stainless steel. I think they call these cable stops. But what I need off of these are the U-bolts. And these are stainless steel with stainless steel nuts. So those will work well. They're going to go over each of the axles. And those are going to bolt that in place to the rigid pallet. Now all I need to do is figure out where I want to mount these axles. Ideally I would put them above this metal track just for make it even more rigid, but the gap here at the end and this piece isn't particularly solid, so I'm going to go further over onto the nylon. We've got this other steel rail which will be underneath, and I think I'll mount it just in that general area. Probably something about like that. you need to reach under here and make sure that the nuts for this are going to be in an accessible spot. I've decided on this spot, I'm going to use this webbing on the bottom here as a guide. If I keep the hole right up against this, then it should be easy to do the same on the other side and keep everything square with the pallet. That way I don't have to worry about anything being really in the wrong spot. All right, there we are with our 3 U-bolts in place. Very easy to do. Took me all of about 5 minutes to place this axle and bolt it down. I'm going to undo the nuts on the other side and put some Loctite on them and then tighten them back up, and we should be nice and solid. I've got 6 inches of axle sticking out on either side. So these aren't actually tightened down yet, but a little bit of this red Loctite on all the threads will make sure that nothing ever comes loose. Here in the US, I'm not sure about other places around the world, the width of a standard railroad track is 4 feet 8.5 inches between the rails, inside to inside. So that's 56.5 inches. So I am adjusting the insides of these to 55.5 inches so that I've got an inch of gap between. I know it'll need at least that. My fear is that a lot of these old tracks that haven't been used or maintained for many, many years are going to vary a lot in width. So I've got to be able to have a little bit of play in there so that these can ride. Hopefully, if anything, they go a little wider where I'm going to be running rather than tightening it up and getting closer together. But I'm going to have adjustable spacers behind the back here. And I will be able to pull off a cotter pin here, a couple of washers. I'll make some different size spacers, and I'll be able to adjust this out on the track should I need to, if I'm running into a lot of tight spots or whatever. So that's the only way I can think of actually making this adjustable so that I can actually custom fit it to the track that I'm running on. We'll see how that works. But so far, the wheels are looking good. I wanted to make sure that the axles were actually going to be long enough, and they are. We're going to stick out almost an inch on either side, which is great. I'm going to put a couple of washers and a cotter pin through, and those will hold them on. I bought 4 of these locking collars here for a 5/8 inch rod. I'm going to put these on first, lock those in place. I'll use some red Loctite on these as well. And that should stop this axle from ever migrating back or forth. It locks up against the pallet itself. And then I cut 2.5 inch spacers. That's what I need for this particular wheel set. Yours may vary, but you can figure out your measurements yourself. And then I'll put on a washer and we'll drop on a wheel. And so we end up with this setup behind each wheel. Okay, so that's the back side. Come around to the front, I'll have a couple of washers here, and then I'll drill this axle out for a cotter pin. I've got a spot marked there. I don't have the washers. I'm low on washers somehow in my collection here, and so I've got to stop on the way home tomorrow and pick those up. But it doesn't stop me from essentially completing this build today. We'll be able to pretty much finish it up. I'll just have a few little things that'll have to go in and do before I can actually take it out and test it. So I noticed that a couple of the bars that are formed into this pallet are somewhat loose and might cause a rattle as I go down the tracks. So I've got this black silicone here, and I'm going to go ahead and just squirt that around and put a little next to each one of these rails between the ribs, and that should get rid of the rattles within this pallet. Here we are with the first look of what this is going to be like. Looks like it's got lots of room on top for everything that I'm going to want. The wheels look great on it, and I like the height of it. I think it'll clear a lot of the brush and general crud that builds up on these old tracks. I've got the bike that I'm going to mount to this sitting right here. First thing we're going to do is take the front axle measurement off of here, and I've got that at 14.5 inches. Here, this is the mount that I'll be using because it's correct for the type of front axle that I have, and that's measuring about 14 inches. So that's not an actual 14 because we're sitting on the discs and not on the wheel here. So I need to subtract 1.5 inches from 14. That'll take us down to 12.5. So we need to bring this mount up 1.5 inches to 2 inches, somewhere in that area. Now the next thing to remember is that this front wheel of this bike, the fork, needs to be in line with these wheels, and the rear wheel of the bike is going to track and follow where the fork is. So this mount actually has to be out here. So what I need to do is go look around through my stash of steel and see if I can come up with something to bolt onto here and bolt this bracket to. So I had this nice piece of steel in my scrap stuff, and I went ahead and drilled it in, painted it black. Oh, speaking of paint, you guys may already know this, but this Rust-Oleum Professional here that you get at Home Depot, it's the high performance enamel, and it's the real tall cans. This is a flat black here. Some of the best paint you can buy. This stuff is amazing, holds up incredibly well, and it dries in like 5 minutes. So you're not standing around waiting for stuff to dry before you can get back to work. Make sure that your wheels are in alignment. You can just put a straight edge between your two discs, and this is perfect. Everything looks really good there. And the next thing to do is mark the center line for the wheel. Center, the other center of the wheels, and right there is where we end up with our center line for our fork mount. Okay, everybody, here we are. The bike's mounted too, and everything's looking pretty good. Everything's wheels are in nice alignment here, so that should track nicely. Like I said, if I have to adjust width at all, I'll be adjusting on that side and leaving these alone so that the three wheels stay in alignment here. I pulled a pull strap on this because there will be times when I'll need to pull this cart along, maybe even off the tracks to get around obstacles. I'm anticipating there's going to be quite a few big boulders, that kind of thing on the mountain tracks. I've got a few cosmetic things that I want to do to this to make it look a little cooler, but all in all, I think it's looking great, and it came out exactly how I pictured it. So I think we're good to go. The first chance I get will be later this week to load all this up on a trailer and head up for Leadville, Colorado. We're going to go up above 10,000 feet, and its first test is going to be on a little bit of the Tennessee Pass up there, which is a real high, cool pass with some real pretty scenery and a very long tunnel. Hey everybody, so I am out with the new rail cart, and we're going to see how it does on Tennessee Pass here. So you can see up ahead here, we've got the tunnel. The door is quite a ways down, but I did walk up to it and I can still walk underneath it. So I should be able to roll underneath that on the e-bike rail cart here. We'll see how that goes. I think everything's going to be fine. But we've got these nice old tracks. We got some noisy guys here that are working on some of the stuff in the area. But they were real interested in the rail cart. Had to come over and check it out. So I'm gonna get that unloaded. We're gonna get on this set of rails and we're gonna start out by hopefully rolling through the tunnel here